Alrighty, good evening, everybody. It's Thursday, November 17th, 2022, 7:30. This is the Town of Newbury Zoning Board of Appeals. Welcome. With us tonight, we have Martha Taylor, who's our town planner. We have Chrissy Beaufrey, who is our administrative assistant. Michelle Wheeler, who is an associate member to the board. We have Jack Kelly, who's a member. Mario Carnavale, who's a member. And myself, Eric Spahn, who's a member and chair. I'd like to say congratulations to Jack for being appointed as a full member.
Congratulations, Jack.
Thank you. Endeavor to repay the trust the town has placed in me.
There we go. So with that, let's open the meeting and get to the first hearing.
First hearing is William Baldwin, 6 Gerard Way. The applicant is requesting a special permit finding for relief of section 97 4D 5C01, increase in footprint, and 2, upward extension of the Newbury zoning bylaws, and any other permit relief as may be required under the town of Newbury zoning bylaws to allow the proposed use project in order to raise the existing non-conforming single-family dwelling right side deck and elevate walkway, and to construct a new elevated single-family dwelling with new front deck with an increase in height on the property located at 6 Gerard, Plum Island, Newbury, Mass. 01951, Assessors Map U01, Lot 108. Continued from October 20th.
Alrighty. So we have a draft of the motion and decision that was made at the last meeting. Did you receive a copy of this by chance? You did?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to read through it and see if we have any edits and discuss it. So with that, we have a copy from Martha that you reviewed. And it looks like you had one.
I had two
comments. Yep. First one is date, and it should be today's date. Today is the date that we're voting to approve. And the second will be part 3, findings and determinations. 1, general findings of fact, and then there's H. And under H it says existing non-conforming one-family lot has a combined lot area of, and the question is, it's not a combined lot, it's a single lot.
That's a typo.
So we're going to cross off combined.
Yes.
Okay. I have 1 or 2 comments. Mario?
No, I'm good.
Jack?
Also good.
Michelle? Okay. Okay, so all right, page 2, part 2, submitted materials and information. D says written documentation. So is D really, is it written documentation, or is written documentation other stuff that follows under it?
I believe there's a section in the special permit application that asks questions, and it's how they form the response to those questions, and we've always called it written documentation.
Okay. Because, and that's in the special permit findings. Is it in the order of written documentation, lot coverage, FAR checklist? That's what kind of threw me off.
I know.
The other 2 are clearly in, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's how we've written all the others.
Okay.
Okay.
And then at the bottom, it talks about J, topographical detail survey, K is a proposed building profile plan, and then L is the Baldwin residence architectural site plan. There's no, or am I missing, there's no architectural building plans and elevations? Are those included in one of the 3 above?
Yeah, I would have to check on that, Eric.
Yep, I know the
Not
survey
sure.
site plan is such, but the profile plan I thought was just, Oh, okay, so you say architectural site plan set.
Yes.
If you say the architectural drawing set, then, I mean, site plan set drawing, that's what threw me off, because I was
Okay.
looking for another plan as opposed to a set of drawings. So,
Is it clarified under 2A right below that? It still says site plan set, but it says with revised elevations.
I don't know, you usually have a permit set, you have a construction set, you have a schematic design set, you have a concept set, and site plan set is what threw me off.
Just the word site plan.
Yeah.
It depends on how he titled it.
This is topographical detail survey.
Right.
Site plan.
That's J.
Yeah, and then this is the architectural section.
Right, so there's no cover sheet
Yeah.
on it.
It's just drawing set, architectural drawing set.
So can we cross off site plan and put drawing set? I wonder if you could do that on L, and if you could do that below on 2A,
Absolutely.
please. Anybody else?
What are we putting instead of site plans? What are we putting instead of site plans?
Drawing,
Drawings.
Do you want it here too, Eric?
yep, and anywhere that, well, we'll ask, just do a word search for anywhere it says site plan set, make it drawing. Okay. Those are my only comments. No other comments? All right. So with that, with the proposed edits that we just made tonight, is there a motion to
Sure.
accept?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the draft decision to include edits of the date, combine lots to single lot, and edit site plans to drawings.
Okay, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye? All right, so it passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you need something else from our architect, or?
No,
No, she's going to draft the decision, and then there's an appeal period, and
I'll get the
Oh,
mailing out
yes.
as soon as possible. That will start the
Right.
clock, and then I'll let you know when the 21st day is,
Yes.
when you can pick it up to record it.
I got it.
Okay,
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Al Ward, 80 Northern Boulevard. The applicant is requesting a special permit finding for relief of section 97-4D5C02, upward extension of the Newbury zoning bylaws, and any other permit relief as may be required in the town of Newbury zoning bylaws to allow the proposed use project in order to renovate the existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on the lot with an increase in height on the property located at 80 Northern Boulevard, Plum Island, Newbury, Mass. 01951, Assessors Map U03.181, and this is continued from October 20th for revised plans.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. Douglas Deshane from Finner and Nicholson, representing the applicant. With me this evening, Attorney Colleen Hayes from our office, as well as Al Ward, one of the owners of the property. However, our architect, Mr. Lamb, is not with us this evening. Just quickly give a quick recap, in case there's people that are here that weren't present for the original application. I'll run through this, but before I do want to say that after the last meeting, we did submit some supplemental information. We provided you the updated plans. We actually had our architect go back in, measure all the rooms, because the board wanted a floor plan of the rooms. So they measured the rooms, he measured the heights, And so we updated the plans and provided you plans, elevations, floor plans, and also, as I say, updated and confirmed the heights and also the FAR numbers. Then we also provided you some pictures and a small statement from my client with respect to the purpose and intent of the addition. I know it was asked why is he doing this, so we wanted to provide for the record some evidence as to that. So that was the new information that we did submit since the last meeting. In fact, that was what was requested and the basis for the continuance. So the project summary, as you'll recall, we're seeking a special permit to redesign the interior of this house, which will remove a bedroom from the first floor, adding a staircase in its place and building a new master bedroom over the existing garage. The purpose in doing so is to provide a master bedroom for the ward's use, as they intend to start spending more time in this home, eventually making it their primary residence. The new bedroom will provide, as we've shown in the pictures, a nice view of the water, which they do not currently have. And you know, I think it's obvious from the pictures, you can see why someone would want to do this. Because of the construction of the new bedroom results in upward extension, the bylaw requires a finding from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I will point out, though, other than that special requirement for upward extensions, there are no other permits necessary, as we are not creating any new nonconformities and we are not exasperating nonconformity. Excuse me, just a reminder, we are a pre-existing non-conforming lot with respect to area. We do meet the end frontage, but no changes proposed. And as we talked about, the structure is pre-existing non-conforming as to a front yard setback and a left side setback. Again, no proposed changes to those non-conformities. Again, we're proposing to redesign the existing structure. The enhanced structure will meet your lot coverage, FAR, and height requirements. The finding required is as the height of the new house will exceed the height of the existing structure, although we are well under the 35-foot limit. And since we're redesigning the interior of the house, there'll be no change to the footprint and therefore no change to the lot coverage. I will note that my client has filed with the Conservation Commission because any activities within the dune area and the barrier beach require a filing with the Conservation Commission. They have concluded their deliberations or their hearings and have concluded that we are in fact not proposing to impact or alter the beach, the dunes in any way. And so they are prepared to issue us an order of conditions. However, they have held their hearing open pending completion of this process in case this process did in fact result in a change that would affect that. So, based on what we've proposed, the Conservation Commission is accepting.
So with following up from where we left this, instead of re-going through the whole presentation,
Yeah.
it was full set of building plans, not half the plans, and so you have made some submission of plans.
Yep.
That's one, so we should check that. Updated plans, the plans appeared for what was being discussed to not have doors or certain things in locations, so we'll look at that. Conservation Commission was the third one, and it sounds like we filed and you've reported on that. And third is that I was going to check with the building inspector, as he said he had visited and said everything was okay, and I did have a discussion with Inspector Bennett and what he recalls seeing out there. And then we had questions in terms of the documentation and what was presented about effectively what was the essence or nature of what was being described and what we're seeing in the plans in the house. So if I think with that and the first three items you reported on the Conservation Commission, can we go to the plans and look at the full set of building plans?
Sure.
And discuss those? That's okay. You take a look at them?
Just briefly.
Okay. Mario?
Yeah, same thing.
Jack?
It's hard on them.
Did you receive a digital copy of these, or do you?
I sent that out. I emailed you guys last week.
I'm just recording that both a hard copy and now a digital copy are available of said plan.
Yes. Yep.
So the plans as shown and presented show the whole, all structures on the property. That was one. Two was having this in order to sort of confirm or check FAR and lot coverage for being presented as stated. Third, that there seemed to be a missing door between the breezeway, what's titled as a breezeway access room, and the covered breezeway. Second floor is the second floor, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Existing. So everything here is just the existing, and then the new plans, there's no update
No changes.
to those plans. All right. Does anybody have any questions on the plans that were presented?
The bathroom on the garage side, is that a half bath? Is that correct?
Yes.
No, it's a 3/4.
3/4. Shower and a sink. No tub.
So on the existing, just to confirm, reading it correctly, the covered breezeway on the existing has a roof over it currently.
Oh, yeah.
And when we're done, it will have a walkway over the deck. So is that what's over it?
Yep,
So it'll be decked on top of,
just the roof.
roof goes
Open.
away and the deck. And the deck
Wow.
And if we were to, is there anything that you'd like to call out or note that's different from what was, any changes between the previous plans and the current plans?
Well, as I said, while we had the architect out there, he rechecked and redid all the roof heights. They're reflected on those plans. We double checked the FAR. You know, he was able to do an additional calculation of all the rooms, so that I'm confident, based on our architect's report to me, that, you know, those numbers have been checked for accuracy in terms of the FAR and the heights. And again, we tried to show everything the board had asked for in these plans, which I know was specifically with respect to showing all the rooms in the structure and all of the egress and access points. And I will be, in a moment, discussing the fact that to address some of the concerns that have been raised by the board as well as the neighbors, we are proposing to eliminate this doorway and replace it with a window. And also we are proposing to completely eliminate the semblance of a kitchenette, including the, electrical and necessary for stoves and things. And the reason we're proposing that is quite honestly, everyone is concerned that this was originally built as a separate unit, that it has been used as a separate unit, and that, what my client will achieve by adding this, moving the bedroom up and making it better is facilitate the use of it as a separate unit. And as we've said before, that was never the intention and purpose of my client. I can't speak to prior owners, but after hearing what the board had to say, and again, some of the comments from the neighbors, we are willing to take any steps necessary to sort of eliminate this concern about this being used as a separate unit. And we thought the best two things we could do were to remove that doorway so that that section of the home doesn't necessarily have, two means of egress and access. Rather, you will now have to come either through the main, right-hand portion of the structure or through that one remaining doorway off the breezeway. And again, as far as the kitchenette, willing to take out the 220 lines and the kitchenette, and any semblance of a kitchen activity is also something we're willing to do, and as I understand has been suggested by some of our abutters council, that those are the kinds of things they would like to see the board require, so that, again, this whole issue of a second unit and the ability to rent it or use it as a separate can be eliminated, because that is not my client's intention.
Increasing the density of use is detrimental, could be seen as detrimental to the neighborhood, so.
No, use of this property as illegally as a two-family would certainly be detrimental to the neighborhood.
We're saying the same thing, we're just stating that you're, I think what you're,
Okay.
is one of the guidelines in terms of,
Right.
is it in keeping with the neighborhood, is it more detrimental to
Right.
the existing neighborhood and the surrounding properties in terms of how the properties and structures and their use?
Well, to the extent that there is a concern that there has been a previous illegal use, I agree with you that, this would, in my opinion, it's really the best way to ensure that it can't happen. And in fact, making it a condition of your approval would add a further layer. And my client is willing to agree to and accept any conditions with respect to the utilization of this as a separate unit, whatever the board feels is comfortable. But again, we want to make as many physical changes as we can to foreclose that possibility.
Understood.
Okay.
And I would say to appreciate the revisions and the client taking steps to make revisions to listen to what was being said. I have to say that I couldn't find anything in the building code that says you can't have multiple kitchenettes if you wanted to, but in terms of use and in terms of what the property has and when properties turn over and sell and how other people intend to use them, the code is set up not only for the code and the bylaws are set up not only for today, but for the longevity of what the structure is going to be used for. So.
And again, as you're well aware, a condition in a permit would allow the building inspector to issue a cease and desist order immediately should someone ever try and do that in any event.
Correct.
So, the neighbors would also have a sort of a policing action available to them. That if they thought something was wrong.
We're mostly friendly neighbors in Newbury and don't have an over-rigorous enforcement protocol, but it is there and can be used if needed. And so having the means of which to do it certainly puts people at ease of how properties are used.
Good fences make good neighbors, and so do good regulations and agreements.
Okay.
If I, Colleen, could you go back to that issues? Mr. Chairman, can I,
Yeah, I'd like you to.
I really don't have much left, I really.
Because I'd like to open it up to anybody
Yeah.
else that has comments. and then
Sure.
if
So
there's any
again,
further
the
discussion.
issues to date that we discussed at the last meeting and which have been presented to us by the neighbors at various times. One was this rental activity of the prior owner and my client, and the intention of the applicant with respect to future rentals. And I think we just discussed that, you know, with all due respect, whatever happened in the past, especially with related to prior owners, it is not my client's intention to do that or to continue that. And again, we, as I sort of jump to the bottom, we've agreed to make some changes. The legality of the addition built in the 1970s, the question has been raised, you know, if you've got an illegal addition, how can you then provide approval to add on to it or change it or modify it in any way? Well, as we've all known from a number of past cases, Mass General laws do provide that if something is built without a building permit, and it appears that in the 70s, when this was built, there doesn't appear to be any records about building permits, although I can say I've had difficulty finding building permits from the 70s in Newbury. Yeah, I heard there were floods and fires and a lot of craziness. But in any event, as we know, and as I think Town Council gave us a little schooling on, there is protection in Mass General law that if a building was constructed more than 10 years ago, even if it didn't have a building permit, and there was never an enforcement or any action taken, that addition or that construction is deemed legal for all purposes, including zoning. So I would respectfully say that this board does have the authority to allow for changes to that addition in light of when it was built and state law. And then, of course, the biggest question has been, is this an illegal two-family? And is that the way it's going to be continued? As I assume, Mr. Chairman, you verified with the building commissioner, he has been in the home, and at that time he did not conclude, based on what he saw, that this was an illegal two-family. Even with the kitchenette, I've had numerous discussions with Mr. Burnett in the past concerning the Bach case and the fact that, you know, kitchens don't make separate units. There's a whole bunch of things like egress and access and expectations of privacy and things like that. But we have, as I said, the wards are proposing to remove that kitchenette, to remove that separate egress and access to that space in hopes of even, you know, solidifying the position that this is not a two-family and that they would not be able or, and certainly don't want to consider it such for rental purposes or otherwise. I will say too that in reading the letter submitted late today by Mr. Roloffs on behalf of the Drosts, I'm not going to address all of this information. I'll let Mr. Roloffs, Attorney Roloffs, present what he wants, but he does in his letter say that given the clear past use of the property as an illegal two-family, certainly a conclusion he drew, that if the board was considering granting a permit, that they requested the following. One, that you include language barring the applicant from installing cooking equipment or otherwise undertaking activities that would create a separate dwelling unit or renting the house as multiple units. We would certainly agree to all of that, including the fact, a condition that would require us to remove any cooking equipment or any electrical or anything else that would facilitate cooking equipment. So we'll go farther than not just agree never to put it in, we'll agree to take it out. 2, require the applicant to remove any gas or electrical connections that we use to operate the stove. Agreed, no questions there as well. And you know, require that the property be serviced by only one water and sewer line. I believe that is the case now, but we could certainly agree that we would never seek to add a second one because I don't think we'd have a legal right to do it in an event. But again, in response to Mr. Roloff's letter, Attorney Roloff's letter, you know, my clients never intended to sort of isolate or be at odds with their neighbors over this. I know they did discuss it in the past. I know that at least one neighbor said as long as they would eliminate the kitchen, everything would be fine. So we are trying to keep, my client is trying to keep in conformance with those discussions and does want to relieve the neighbors from concerns that this home could be or would be used for illegal purposes. So we would do that. So those seem to be the biggest issues. And again, we are agreeable to all of those changes and conditions to put everyone at ease that it's not their intention or expectation to do so. Colleen, can you go to the next slide? I think I'm pretty close. So again, our position has been that the redesign of the existing dwelling will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood or to the overlay district. In my opinion, based on the numerous special permits I've sought in Newbury over the last a year and a half, this is a relatively minor addition. We're adding 483 square feet. And I apologize, this is a typo. I will take responsibility for it. We are raising the mean roof line from, as reflected on the plans. I've corrected my presentation. And again, I do apologize. But we're going from 19 feet 3 inches as a mean to 21.3. So overall of the entire structure, we're really only raising the roof mean roof height by about 3 feet, or just over 2.5 feet. We're not changing the footprint and lot coverage, so we're not increasing the density or intensity of the structure on the lot. And the proposed alteration and the increase in height is certainly consistent with the neighborhood. Our home at a mean height of 21.2 feet, or 21 feet 2 inches, is still probably well below most of the surrounding homes, and certainly on average, if we look at homes that have been redeveloped or renovated on the island, people are generally pushing that 35-foot limit to the best they can. My client's not proposing that. So I feel that the proposed, if you look at just what he's proposing to do in terms of physical changes to the building, this is not a significant addition. It's consistent with the neighborhood and the PIOD, and as I said, it's actually less dramatic than most of the upward extensions we see occurring on the island. So, and lastly, there's been a question raised of whether we're intensifying the use of the property by adding this additional bedroom space. Well, I would present to the board that you do have a regulation to address intensity of use, and that's your FAR, right? That's, in terms of whether a structure and the living area in a structure is overly intense or is being intensified to an unreasonable amount. This existing structure has an FAR of 13.3%, and even with this addition, we're going to be at 16.38% FAR. And as we know, the allowed FAR is 25%. So we're not even getting close. So I disagree with the statement that this is going to overburden the lot, or that it's going to intensify the use on this lot beyond, again, from a physical perspective. I think that's why you have an FAR, is to keep that intensity and masking and scaling within a reasonable level, and we're well below your limitation. Just to
Counselor, if there's something new,
okay.
you made your presentation last time. We've got other stuff to discuss, and then there's...
All right, well, then I won't go through the next slide, which talks about the justifications, why we're not, why we're not significantly more detrimental. And with that, I will
Okay.
happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, we may have questions for you to follow up.
All right.
Afterwards. Okay, thank you. So with that, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak in favor of?
He might have changed his mind.
Usually go with the favorable first, so. Anybody in the audience that would like to speak favorably about the project that's here tonight? All right, take that as a no. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak against the product, the application? You, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jeff Roloffs, attorney with offices at 44 Merrimack Street in Newburyport. I represent the Dross, who are here with me this evening. The owners of the property immediately south of this property. They own the property at 76 Northern Boulevard. First, I want to just apologize for getting my letter to you late in the process here. I was only recently attained. I got it into you when I could. I know you don't like to receive things day of, and I don't expect that you've had a chance to read this. I'm not going to read it either, but I do want to walk through it quickly and just hit the high points so that you're aware of what's in it. And I'm hoping that this hearing will be continued and you'll have time to digest the information more fully. So, 4 points. First, on page 1, the board should ensure that the property is not used as a two-family. There's been a lot of discussion of this, obviously. This is a big issue. It's a big issue primarily because it has been used as a two-family, not only by the prior owner, but by the current owner. And we've included here, and I saw that in previous submittals by the neighbors. They also submitted listings. You know, this property is a rental property. It has been, at least. And it's been rented and marketed as either a large house with 5 bedrooms, but it's also been marketed as 2 units. And those listings are here in my letter. I'm not going to go through them, but they've characterized the unit in the garage, or behind the garage, as an apartment, as a studio with kitchenette, as an in-law apartment, and they actually describe it as being beachfront and connected by a breezeway to another unit. So there's no doubt that it's been marketed and rented for two-family uses. It's illegal. The town could have enforced this at any point in time. They don't have to wait for an approval from this board with a condition in the approval prohibiting a two-family use. It's already illegal. So I take issue with the suggestion that by granting this approval and putting a condition in it, that gives the town enforcement authority that it doesn't already have. It already has that authority. It's chosen not to exercise it. That's fine. It's not fine, actually, but that's the way it's been. That's the reality. They could enforce this tomorrow, even if you deny this permit. Point number 2 starts on page 5 of my letter. Obviously, a lot of this letter went to the two-family use. Point number 2 is that the proposed project will be substantially more detrimental than the existing structure. You heard these points from the neighbors previously. I'm not going to reiterate all the reasons that that's the case, but I do want to emphasize, first, one of the stated purposes of the Plum Island Overlay District is, and I quote, to limit the expansion of non-conforming single and two-family structures so as to prevent the exacerbation of existing problems with density and intensity of use. So this property actually is unique as related to that purpose. The use of this particular property, unlike some of the other properties that you've granted permits for, the use of this property has proven to be a problem. It's being rented out to large groups. You heard this from the neighbors, groups of up to 14 people with 5 cars. And what I thought sort of highlighted this for me when I was looking at the property from Google Maps, if you look at this property at Google Maps and you zoom out, you will see that the area behind this house is completely barren of vegetation. All of the other properties along the beachfront have vegetation. I mean, it's a stark contrast, and I think that that reflects the intensity of the use here. And you heard it from the neighbors, it's already a problem. So by expanding the capacity of the building, of the structure, you would be exacerbating the problem. It's a significantly larger bedroom. And I'll also just mention one of the submittals that you got more recently from the applicant, when they were explaining the reason they wanted to do this, one of the reasons was that they wanted to showcase the view from that second-story bedroom. Showcase when I read that, sort of highlights my interpretation of that anyways, seemed to be an intention to market this unit for continued rental. You heard tonight that they plan to move into it and use it as their home, but if they're looking to showcase the view from this larger second-story bedroom, that sounds to me like they're planning to continue renting it. The damage to the dunes will be exacerbated, as I mentioned. There's already a problem in that regard, and just bringing the capacity up and more people to this area is going to cause an existing problem to become worse. Point number 3, we think there needs to be more review during this process of the work that's actually going to be required to accomplish the renovations that are being proposed. And specifically what we talk about in my letter is that, at least I haven't seen anything related to the foundation under this breezeway and this garage and apartment structure. So you'll remember, and I think that even the applicant described, these structures were built years ago. No one's been able to find any permits related to these structures. It's not clear that they were built to any code requirements. It's not clear what they're even on, what the structural integrity of these structures is. According to my clients, the foundation, if you can call it that, for these structures is basically 2x4s on the sand with concrete poured in between them. And I don't know what the details are, but neither do you. And so that's the question. It seems to me you need to understand that, because the project may be a lot more, it may involve a lot more work, even if it doesn't trip this 50% threshold. It still might involve a lot more work than they even know, if they haven't had a structural engineer out there to confirm that their renovation can be supported by whatever structural components are already out there. So I haven't seen anything in the plans or the submittals that provide those details. These are safety concerns, not only for the occupants of this building, but when we get to the next point, the substantial improvement point, the reason all of these houses that are being renovated are being required to flood-proof these properties is not only to protect the occupants of those buildings, it's to protect everyone else out on the island, right? So a house that gets impacted by flooding and isn't built properly becomes a hazard for everybody out there, particularly the neighbors. So that's my 4th point, which is related to the substantial improvement question that I'm sure you're familiar with, which basically says that if your improvement exceeds 50% of the value of the structure, not of the whole property, but the structure, then you have to flood-proof your property. That's why all these houses are being put up on pilings and basements are being filled, etc. I understand that analysis is often done after these special permits are issued, but here where there's a legitimate question about the structural integrity of what's there and whether or not, and what the foundation even consists of, I think it makes sense for this board to require that review to be done before you close your hearing. They've provided a cost estimate for this project, which conveniently comes in right below the 50% threshold. And I haven't seen in what's been submitted to you any substantiation of that cost estimate. There are requirements as to what's supposed to be included, and there's supposed to be detailed cost estimates that are compiled by qualified people, not just owners or just any old contractor, right? They're qualified people who are providing reasonable, sound cost estimates for the project after determining all the work that has to be done for that project. So again, if they haven't had a structural engineer out there yet, and that's something they're going to do later, this project may be twice the cost of what they're projecting once they get those details. So we're urging you to have that substantial improvement analysis done before you close your hearing, because we think it's very likely that that's going to lead to this project being more than what's being presented. There is also a question, I think the building inspector may have already thought about this and decided against. I just asked the question of whether or not that 50% calculus goes against the value of just the garage structure that they're improving, or the entire structure. My understanding is that his initial view on that was the garage structures, it's connected by that breezeway to the main house, so the denominator in the calculus is the whole structure. Similarly, if they exceed the 50%, the whole structure has to be brought up to the flood-proof code. I raise that as a question. I think that's something that the building inspector should consider further as he's reviewing that. And again, I hope that you will keep this process open while that review is being undertaken. And the last point I'll make is just with respect to the visual impact of this project. The structures, this is my last point, the structures that are there are a main house, a breezeway, and a garage. So the breezeway and garage are currently subordinate to the main house. It's a large structure from the street because it's parallel to the road. So it's a wide structure from the street. When you take that garage and you put a second story on it, you're basically looking at what would be considered by most people as two houses connected by a breezeway. It's not going to look like a house that had a small addition added onto it. It's going to look like two houses with a breezeway. So that is a detriment to the neighborhood. It's an exacerbation of the aesthetics of the neighborhood for a lot that's undersized with insufficient frontage. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you sit down, I guess, typically we do get, you have a nice detailed letter, you spent time outlining everything, and I think some of the items in terms of discussion, if we were to walk through your 5 items, I did bring up, we're not a town that's driving around trying to enforce everything every day, and we're not trying to catch people doing stuff. We're hoping everybody is honest through the process and the intended use. That said, if any resident feels that there's the bylaws are not being followed, then there is a procedure to do that. We're not the enforcement committee, so that's just that.
Totally understood.
And
yep.
I don't. It's been, in my 10 years, it's been rare that we've had 1 or 2 issues where we've had to actually bring the building inspector in on enforcement issues as part of the hearing. That's all I'm going to say there. There are other items that you made that are really legitimate comments, but they are not the purview of the ZBA, but of the Conservation Commission. So understanding things like the dunes and the vegetation, we understand that, and we can appreciate that in terms of the whole, but it's not our governance or our section of the bylaws to interpret and to enforce. The existing conditions and integrity of the building and the percentage of construction, I mean, that is, again, the purview of the building inspector, and I'm not trying to deflect or shed off responsibility for discussing or hearing what you're saying or using that as part of the application and understanding what the board is thinking. But again, there are different departments and commissions in town that have their authority. So if there are issues, then those are to be taken up with the Conservation Committee or the building inspector. And flood-proof, we can talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I'd like to ask simply, though, if there were conditions of what was presented for removal of the kitchenette, of removal of the second door, of conditions that were placed on this to keep it a single-family house where people were watching over for enforcement, would the neighbors have any different opinion of the project?
No.
My clients wouldn't. I mean, they have other issues just with the appearance and the use. Again, the use of this building has already been too much, and it would only get worse.
Size, I guess, and shape in terms of density are something that we consider.
It's good
Whether
capacity.
somebody likes the house or thinks it's a good style is not something that we really have an opinion of.
It's a capacity. It's primarily a capacity issue, and you're enlarging capacity by building over a structure that we know very little about right now. And part of it is, and my points with respect to this, I understand that you don't do the substantial improvement analysis. My point is that And I also understand that's often done after permits are issued. We feel very strongly that here, when those details are evaluated, the project that's depicted in these plans is going to be, the project is going to be a lot different than what's depicted in these plans. It's just a simple interior reconfiguration. The structural integrity of of the garage and breezeway are in question. And it relates to the project that's in front of you, and until you understand what the actual project is going to be, you can't evaluate the impacts. That's our view on that.
Okay. And understanding and appreciate that statement, we do appreciate when we get actual construction documents that have been filed for building permits, so we know exactly what's going beyond. A standard condition of any decision is that if there are any changes or alterations to what the submitted documents, that then you need to come back before us.
That's another way to do it.
And I understand that point of the conditions that were, conditions that could be applied to a decision in terms of how they get managed then as a, and your thought of managing or trying to relieve those conditions before it gets to that point. Right.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak for or against? Anybody? No?
Actually, Tim left.
Jerry Kleiner, we own the houses across the street.
What's the address?
75 Northern Boulevard.
Thank you.
I think the main feeling that I think we have is that this house is already being used to the max, and the amount of use that is happening there is can be overwhelming. And adding 500 or so square feet to it is just going to make that worse. So to that extent, I think it really is detrimental to the neighborhood. Another issue that is a concern is that this is non-conforming. It encroaches on town property, and the proposal is to add something that would be on this encroachment as well as be within the normal setback. And that's going to block views. It's going to make it less likely that the encroachment or that the setback would ever be normal. So to me, that adding within this setback area and on top of a town encroachment is also detrimental to the neighborhood because it's going to make it all more permanent and also partly block the access. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I know Attorney, my name is Timothy Dross, and I'm represented by Attorney Roloff with my store. So I just want to make clear is our major concern with this property, and obviously Attorney Roloff talked about many things that are a concern, which obviously after tonight we'll continue to drive those with other committees. But the major issue here is that you can spread it, say whatever you want. This property is a two-family. It's an illegal two-family. The board's argument is they need to add a bedroom to have a beach view over a garage. They already have a house with a bedroom with a beach house, as we all do. We all have single-family homes. My house is right next door to their house. It was built in the same era. We were required to elevate the house. We didn't even do as much construction here. We were allowed to touch the garage at all by the town. We couldn't do anything to that garage because it was a separate structure. Our garage is connected to our house by our deck. The conditions by the town would not allow us to touch it. If we touched it, we have to elevate it. So I understand what they're trying to happen here. What's happening here is Mr. Ward wants to do some rehab on his property and have an extra space. but he wants to circumvent the PIAC, because if he did any work on his specific house, on the actual house, then that house would have to be elevated. Without any question, if he touched anything, it would have to be elevated. The other thing is, there's a garage there. They're just saying they're looking to move a bedroom upstairs. The bedroom's downstairs 100 square feet. They're looking to add 400 square feet upstairs for a property that's already advertised by the wards as a two-family. So, you know, as an owner of a property, we bought our home in a district we felt that we didn't want to live on Hampton Beach. It was a single-family home. That's what it's zoned for. And that's what we expect the town to honor, what we purchase. It severely affects the value of my property. If the town allows a two-family, whatever way they want to say it is clearly a two-family. It is clearly a two-family right now. My expectation of the town would be to remove that two-family. There's no permits for it. You can't find any permits. It's not zoned for it. It's not zoned for an in-law apartment right now, which it's advertised, and we know it has 2 points of egress. And whether it's the argument of it being grandfathered, it's not grandfathered to be illegal. The space can be there, but you can't illegally use it, and you certainly can't continue to add more space to it and improve an illegal duplex. So he has a house. It's a single-family house, as we all do. And you have a garage. You can't make two separate properties in an area that's zoned for single-family. And that's what's happening. It's clear. It's clear what's happening. It's clear what the town has allowed, and I understand that their argument is nobody's complained. But the complaint has been brought now. We're clear. I brought the complaint that I live next door, and there's an illegal two-family next door to my property. They obviously brought it to your attention, but it has been brought to your attention. And it's been brought to the town's attention. And I understand there's been discussion with the building inspector, but the building inspector doesn't make decisions on changing zoning. So that's we want the wards to be able to fix their home. And in the plans, you can see they have a home. And they can fix it as long as they follow the guidelines for what the town requires and the improvement of that. But this board should not allow something that's illegal to continue and build upon that. That affects all of the neighbors. Whether we're talking about, you can clearly see the use of it with no grass behind the property, the only one. So I'd ask the town in this board to refer it back that we have legal proof that this can be a two-family before you allow any more work to be done for that. Thank you.
So, in terms of enforcement and bringing it to the attention of the town, has that been brought to, have you submitted anything to the building inspector?
We have not. We have not requested enforcement. I'm familiar with that process. We have not done that yet.
The building inspector is the enforcement officer.
Right. Yeah.
So-
No, I'm aware of that process. We have not initiated enforcement proceedings against the board.
Okay. It's clear in the photos of the interpretation of the dunes behind the house, whether it's used or not used, or whether the use from the house is creating the condition of the dune. We're not dune scientist people, and without seeing the proof of activity, I don't know quite what we can say or do that. There is a public beach access adjacent to the house that brings people back and forth, and whether people are, if the lane was clearly roped off, then maybe there's more of a consideration. Maybe there are more public people that trying to access across the property because somehow they see it, or because they recognize the house, and that's how they're getting back and forth to the beach. I don't know, but
Mr. Chairman, there is evidence, testimony in the record that was presented at the last meeting and in the neighbor's September letter as to the number of people that are occupying this house. So that, I understand your point. You don't know if they're the ones who caused the damage to the dune, but just to remind you, there's evidence of large numbers of people renting this home and using it, and it's a very intensive use.
Yeah,
So I just didn't want you to forget that.
I understand that, and the ability to effectively change that now is the ability to put conditions on it that then can be controlled as, again, we're not the enforcement, and everybody has the right to improve their house, and everyone has equal rights, and sometimes a lot of neighbors, not saying in this case, but make claims against somebody else in terms of their application and their project, in which if we would put a condition that they've just lost their same rights, that they would like to limit, then that's the property for the application, I'm sure they'd quickly withdraw what they had just said. So, trying to size up and understand the neighborhood as a whole, and I can see that, and we have asked in the past, that in terms of the neighborhood, there has been documentation of photos, and there has been some plans or images that give us some sense of the condition of what the neighborhood is. I don't know if anybody else on the board feels that there's more information, or they have enough information, or they've seen, or there's something that needs to be understood in terms of what the essence of the neighborhood, existing neighborhood is that the application would be compared to.
I think the only question I had, I think you already asked it once, so just wanted to clarify, is that if these conditions were met, would the neighbors be happy? The three conditions that you listed.
Those conditions only address the two-family use.
Right.
The problem is that it puts it on the neighbors to become the monitors of those conditions, right? I mean, that's as compared to a denial, obviously. I mean, the neighbors here don't want the capacity of this basically two-structure complex to be increased. So we suggested some conditions in the event you do approve it, sort of to mitigate that one issue, but that doesn't satisfy them. Yeah. I mean, I would be happy to submit, understand, Mr. Shannon, what you're talking about, potentially some photographs of other structures in the neighborhood to compare to what's here and being presented here, and we'd be happy to do that. We haven't done that.
Just looking at the aerial
Yeah.
photo, I mean, there's some larger houses to the south, and then there are some houses on much smaller lots that are proportionally much bigger to their lot width than the size of the lot with the house on it. So there's lots of quick comparisons that could just be quickly deemed, and if it's down to the finer points, then the documentation of exactly what the lots and what the character of I would call it somewhat the immediate neighborhood, or the character of Plum Island is representing.
Well, I think the most striking character and unique character of this building and with the proposed addition is what I mentioned, which is that on one lot, it's effectively putting two buildings on one lot in terms of what you're going to see is if they got rid of the breezeway, it would clearly look like two buildings, two-story homes. They happen to be connected by this breezeway that was built at some point in time. We don't even know what it consists of, but that's the only reason why they're even able to call it one building. But it's basically two buildings, and they're looking to expand the second building. It's not a subordinate accessory building to the main house any longer. It becomes a second primary structure in its appearance, and that affects the density and the aesthetics of the neighborhood. So I think that's the most sort of unique.
If the breezeway was removed and the lot was cut in half, and then you compared the width of the existing structures to the adjacent neighbors from the photo, you'd be hard pressed to tell any difference between the smaller lots and this lot. And so if this lot happens to be wider and happens to have a structure that's parallel to the road as opposed to being perpendicular to the road, the assessment of the neighborhood goes at lots of levels, and to be not more detrimental than the existing neighborhood in terms of what is there has been our guidance and has been confirmed by town council. So I think you bring up some interesting points. I think there's some things to confirm. There might be some rebuttal that either tries to answer some of the questions and/or we may have to get some more information. So with that, is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak?
I would just say that what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, comparing other houses, but again, whether the size is smaller or bigger, they're one single family house. That's what they are. They're one single family house. And the argument here is clear, that there's no permitting and that space is separate from the house. So that, but let me finish. You're comparing single family houses and whether those houses are bigger on a lot. Those other houses are also on piers and elevated, and they're single family houses. This is clearly a two family, and you're proving something that's illegal.
And the existing condition and assessment, as I had said in the beginning, there is nothing in the building code that says you can't have a couple kitchenettes in your house, whether how.
But
I understand, and so that's the kitchenette, and that was brought up previously as the red flag of looking at this, and that there wasn't a door to the other side of the breezeway that would make this totally separate, and so that was another red flag that was brought up in terms of providing complete and full plans. If in terms of the building inspector, I would think that in terms of what is obvious of has a single assessment card, there's a single tax record for it, it has a single water and sewer hookup to it, are some of the things that he would look at in terms of his assessment of the property. Certainly the use, and if the use was something, but the use may be something, everybody has the right to correct or rectify a use. If it comes down to the question of really just this covered breezeway and what is access to the breezeway that makes it one unit or 2 units. Our definitions in our bylaws do state that what a dwelling unit is. You have that listed in your letter, and if the kitchenette is removed and there is no kitchen in or kitchen within that, then the definition of dwelling unit doesn't apply to that part. And if we bring up, and we've had a few of these that we try very hard to impose the bylaw, but if we cannot, and have been instructed by town council that we cannot make assumptions beyond what is being represented in the plan. And so here, in terms of noting the kitchenette as a red flag and the connection, those two items that we brought up last time have been addressed. Just to say that. I do think that, if anybody wants to jump in, my last comment would be that in terms of the amount of work and the existing conditions, a lot, as I said, a lot of times we would really prefer to have and actually put it in the application that you should submit final construction drawings, but a lot of people come here with the intent of trying to make sure that they can actually have a project before they go to the next step of having construction documents and that expense. The fact that you need a site plan and the fact that you need a representative set of dimensional drawings is what have been enforced. And we have had some people that have had some pretty loose or very early concept and have asked them to firm up what they're presenting because it was too conceptual, and we would be right back at it because we know that they going through a design process that they would obviously make changes and we weren't going to approve those plans. Or we could do a conditional decision and it wouldn't be filed until the final set of drawings was given to us so that we had enough evidence to see that that was a real set of plans. So I'll ask the board members or if else, if you have any questions or comments for either
Just
for or
a
against the
small
yeah.
question, the breezeway, is that heated space?
No.
So you essentially, this time of year, you go outside in the cold to go into the garage space?
Oh, there's windows, it's enclosed,
Yeah,
it's
but it's
just
not
not heated.
Yeah, so it's not habitable space in
No.
the winter time.
Eric, I would just ask, is there information that you're looking for, based on pictures, sites, or that we should think about?
Well, I'd like to, I think that, for me, before we allow you to have a chance to respond to everything, I would say that the Conservation Commission, and understanding what you had said, that they had given conditions of approval, but were holding it, I'd like to understand that they've, of what they've understood in terms of providing their approval, and I guess does it simply come down to that there's no outward extension of the perimeter of the building, and so therefore that's their limiting or guiding factor of what they're looking at?
I didn't attend that hearing, but in discussing it and reviewing my client's notice of intent filing with them, that is exactly what the conclusion was, that, you know, under the Wetlands Protection Act, if you're proposing to alter, you know, area within a resource area, you have to file. And while we weren't proposing to alter, because we are on a barrier beach, we have to file for any work on the structure on the lot. So that's why we filed, but certainly explained to the board that there is no proposed disturbance of the ground surrounding the building, and that all of the work would be, you know, upward extension of the existing structure. That just does not create a situation of you know, alteration. So, you know, the board thought it would be best to wait before issuing their decision to be sure that nothing that came out of this hearing would cause us to have to do something structurally different, which may alter. So it's kind of catch-22.
Has a structural engineer been brought onto this project to analyze this?
No, we have an architect that's reviewed it, sure.
So,
Yeah, so we don't know yet, right, if something in the foundations have to be adjusted, which could affect some of the surrounding
Well,
land.
we, again, based on our architectural review and his discussion with my client about, you know, what he wanted to achieve, you know, none of that has been raised as an issue. But again, you know, as was stated, many times people want to find out if they have a project before they go out and expend the cost of detailed construction documents, you know. Really, it's the applicant who takes the risk in coming to you to get permission to do a proposed project. And if it does turn out that, you know, they made a miscalculation and now the garage has got to be completely rebuilt, and then obviously that would trip the substantial improvements. I mean, that's the applicant's risk. And you weigh that risk against the risk of spending all that money first and then finding out you don't get a special permit. So, you know, I think you can agree, my client has done the process the way that most people do it. And again, I don't know why we are, well, I'll answer that question that way, but Mr. Chairman, I would like just a couple of minutes to respond to some of the statements that have been made. And one of them relates to the question of the structural integrity of the garage.
Mr. Chairman, can I just get clarification on the Conservation Commission process? Because my understanding was that that hearing was still open and they continued the hearing because they wanted to see how this process played out. I wasn't under the impression that they were ready to vote in favor of this project and were just holding back the written decision or something like that. I don't think it's gone that far. I think that they have an open hearing, they're still taking in comments, and we plan to submit some of these same comments to them. They need to understand it, and I'm not suggesting that you need detailed building plans, But a structural engineer should at least look at the foundation and get a handle on whether or not he or she thinks it's gonna require some work, or if you can just sort of do the interior renovations that these guys are talking about.
So, again, we always appreciate when someone's gone to every other board and commission and filing within the town before they get to us. It doesn't always happen that way.
I know, I
So
get the
sometimes
complexity.
the approval of the Conservation Commission is a condition of the permit, or a special permit. So it does, and I think that we would not, or at least for me at the moment, would not have, would just, a condition that it needs to receive Concom approval would be sufficient. Second part is that in looking at your statement about proposed work and what might trigger additional changes or more changes, I think warrants some more investigation or research. If that is applicable and the cause of either cost and or conditions cause changes, then that would affect I would think that would affect the Concom's process and decision. Second, I think the one thing that we did miss last time that I didn't quite follow up or ask anybody else to follow up on is the stance of the town for structures that are on town, that exist on town land. And if there's any, I don't know, Martha, you're Martha and Larry tonight, because Larry's not here. Larry is our liaison from the planning board. Martha is our planner and is on the planning board. Larry is a lawyer and guides us on some of the technical issues. That's why I made that little light joke about Martha, but Martha does everything in town, and maybe.
Not quite.
Is there a stance by the town on effectively, and I think what was said previously by somebody else is the permanence of making something, and whether it is, if it wasn't allowed previously, but it does meet the condition of the law that it has stood there and has not been challenged and is now part of the grandfathering in. The concern going forward is how do you, if you were to make that more permanent, is that an issue? And does the town have a standing on, I don't know, does there need to be an easement? Does it need to be something else because the structure is on town property and the town should recognize that somehow?
I can't answer that question.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're asking, and it'd probably be a question for council.
Chairman Swan, if I can, Colleen Hayes with Finner and Nicholson. I did talk with Peter regarding that encroachment of the town. And I just wanted to, there's been a lot of talk about the dunes, and I sort of want to just clarify it, why there's no vegetation behind there. Prior to our client buying the home, the previous owner had bulldozed the dunes completely for a view of from the first floor. The Army Corps of Engineers then came in, rebuilt the dunes, put a lien on the property. So before our client could buy the property, he had to have that lien released, and the town agreed. It was sort of a quid pro quo. We have part of our access on your land, you have a part of your house on our land, let's just agree to get along, essentially is what happened. So that sort of details why there isn't that vegetation in the backyard, because it was in the middle of the night, bulldozed down by a prior owner. So since our client has taken over ownership of the property, it's actually, the dunes have actually gone about 6 or 7 feet higher than they originally were when he bought the house 11 years ago. So I hope that helps kind of clarify things as far as, you know, how things got to where they are today.
Can I just add to that since I'm
So, in terms of this understanding, is there anything that is documented in terms of the discussion, and in terms of Conservation Commission, there was no suggestion or guidance or thought to help improve or put back what was previously there or anything like that?
So it's my understanding that the town said, okay, we'll release the lien if we can, you know, keep our access on, essentially in your backyard. So the public access goes across Mr. Ward's backyard to some extent to get down to the water.
Yes, sir.
Just to speak to the, what was said. The lien was released because they wanted to replenish the beach and put the fence up there, not for the town property, I believe, but to speak to the back area. So that's still with no grass up. It's been witnessed by neighbors that Mr. Ward continues to bobcat that area. The dune was plowed down by the previous owner 15 years ago. There's still no grass there. That's because they continue to destroy the dune, push the sand out of that area, still today, still recently. There's not, and when we're talking about the path area, there's a path on the side of Mr. Ward's house. Every 2 houses, there's a path. My next door neighbor, his path is well more used than Mr. Ward's, because there's more parking there. You can see in the Google View photos that all of us have grass. Our dunes have improved. They're right up to our houses. If you don't touch the dune for 1 year, if you don't walk on the dune, the grass grows. Me and the neighbors have added sand fences to continue to improve it. It takes 1 year. So to say that it was the previous owner that bulldozed it in the middle of the night and that's why there's no grass there, that's not the case. That's not what's happening. And it's continuing to be damaged. And because of the heavy use that's already there, it's not because people are walking through there. There's a clear path off the property.
Understood. And again, I think that, we can see that and we can understand the argument of use and exacerbation of use and intensity of use and increasing the use. I think my question about the town's understanding of the structure on the property and whether the town's willing to have that, and if there's record of that, anything about the dune, the destruction of the dune or the recreation of the dune, we believe really is a Conservation Commission discussion, an argument for them. I hear what you're saying, and so we have partial understanding of it, but it's not a full issue for us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So at the moment, I think there's still some things to clarify here, and if you'd like to have.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I would certainly
Simple and
appreciate that
direct.
opportunity. First of all, trying to recall everything that's just been presented. The first thing I want to say is I do agree with our neighbor. This board should not be issuing a permit that is going to facilitate or perpetuate an illegal activity or to allow someone to operate an illegal activity. We're not asking for that. We're asking for a permit to add less than 500 square feet to a building. We're asking to not add additional bedrooms. We're asking to relocate a bedroom. Yeah, we're making it a little bigger. Is it a crime that you want your master bedroom to be a little bigger? As we've explained, my clients want to do this partially to facilitate their use of this house as a single-family home, both now and in the future when they intend to have more permanent residency there. So, we're not asking you to perpetuate or facilitate an illegal activity. We're asking you for a permit to put an addition onto a home that is well within your requirements and your legal, dimensional requirements. I don't even know how to address this question of the dunes and what my client does or doesn't do. It's clear that we're just throwing a lot of stones to put my client as a bad actor, and therefore he shouldn't be entitled to a permit to improve his home. Well, I do want to question, if all this activity has been going on, and my client's been bulldozing dunes and all of this other stuff, and obviously the neighbors are well aware of it, why has no one ever made any filing, any complaint to the building inspector, to the Conservation Commission, or to anyone else? And as far as I understand, that whole dune bulldozing and the reconstruction and the lien
And the fact that the public right-of-way is on my client's property, and my client's house was on the corner of the town's property, why would the town, and I know Attorney Hayes mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers because they obviously came in on enforcement, but I can only assume your Conservation Commission was right up there with this, on this whole issue. Why would the dune have been rebuilt, the lien released, if there were issues about it or about the house? So, you know, again, that is just past history that I don't understand the relevance to what we're asking you to do, and that is to determine whether a 500 square foot addition onto a property that meets all of your requirements except we're an upward extension, so we need a special permit, why all that stuff is just being, you know, used to cloud the issue at hand. Now, I do want to very quickly, and I promise quickly, address Attorney Roloff's 4/5 points. One, you know, they want to ensure that it's not a two-family, and our neighbor has claimed it is currently being used in a legal two-family. I don't know much more we could do to prove to this town and to this board that it is not my client's intention to operate this as a two-family, rent it as a two-family, or do anything. In fact, we're taking steps that are not legally required. As we know, you can have kitchenettes all over the place, but we want to take away the kitchenette, we want to take away the electric power, we want to do everything in our power to show that this is not perpetuating an illegal use, nor will it be used illegally going forward. I don't know what more we can do. The second one is, you know, it's going to be substantially more detrimental because we're increasing the use, intensifying the use. We're not asking for an additional bedroom. We're asking to relocate a bedroom, make it a little bigger. Again, I don't see, if that was the case, if relocating a bedroom is an intensity of the use that's detrimental to the neighborhood, how is it that this board allows people to add bedrooms under any circumstances? Clearly that would be detrimental to the neighborhood because you're increasing the intensity of the use. And we're not even asking for another bedroom, we're just asking to move it and make it a little bigger. So I just can't follow this line of reasoning that, you know, relocating and enlarging a bedroom is allowing for an illegal use and an intensification of a use beyond what this is reasonable and beyond what this board has ever granted, because you've allowed people to add bedrooms. So, you know, wasn't that detrimental to the neighborhood? The issues of the foundation and the substantial improvement standard, you know, the foundation and structural integrity is not a component of substantial detriment or otherwise to the neighborhood. That's your building inspector's purview. I don't have to remind you that. We're going to have to file building permits. Those building permits are going to show whether we have structural integrity. And it will also solidify for the building inspector the question of whether or not we're, you know, going over the substantial improvement limitations. My client has sat with the building inspector, discussed this project, provided him our rough estimates of cost, and Peter's reviewed it, and he is clearly, based on the numbers we have today, the assessed value of the house by the town, and the estimated cost for the construction, we're close. And Peter said we were close. But he did say, based on the information he had, the project as being proposed could reasonably fall within that, you know, under the limit. The first thing we're going to do is have this home, the structure reassessed. I mean, it hasn't been assessed for decades, and you know, it's clear that it's going to probably double or triple in value, which certainly gives us a little more room. But the bottom line is that call and the decision to issue a building permit for what we're proposing and what we're asking you to provide a special permit for is the building inspector's call. All of that is, as we've discussed. And it has been the standard procedure for people to talk to the building inspector to make sure that they appear to be under that substantial improvements, come to this board, see if they get a permit and a project, and then we do the details with Peter. He won't issue a building permit for this project if we violate that thing. You know it, I know it, our neighbors know that. You know, this whole idea of we have two structures here, well, that may be the conclusion of our neighbor,
But your assessor, your building inspector, and everyone else in this town is deeming this to be a single-family home for purposes of this permit. Again, I don't know what to say. I don't, with all due respect, the neighbors are now saying, oh geez, we know they've been renting it as a two-family, they've been doing all this stuff. We know it, we watched it. Again, why has no one raised this point to anyone? And lastly, the last thing I want to say is this argument about the intensity of use, that by moving a bedroom, we're somehow going to be able to put 100 people in this house. Again, my client has had discussions with his neighbors about his renting the home. We haven't said he hasn't rented the home as a whole. And, if he decides to do that going forward, that's his legal right. But never has a single neighbor said to him, you've had too many people, they've caused noise, they've been disruptive, we don't want it to happen. And there's never been a report to the police, to the building inspector, anyone else. But now all of a sudden everyone's coming out of the woodwork and saying, oh, the use is too intense. Well, be that as it may, we're not asking for more bedrooms. So I don't see how a determination can be made that we're intensifying the use of the home. We're not. I'd just like to get back to basics here, and that is, my clients are required, as determined by the building inspector, to seek a special permit for the addition to their single-family home. We meet all of your rules and regulations. The question comes down to, will we be more substantially detrimental to the neighborhood? That is, and the PIOD. That's the bottom line. And yet we've shown you, we're well below your FAR, we're well below your height, we're well below your lot coverage. We're not adding bedrooms. We're not exasperating any nonconformities. We're not creating any new ones. There's been no evidence that this is going to be substantial detriment to the neighborhood. We did provide you, I thought, a pretty comprehensive review of the neighborhood. We showed you pictures of the houses on both sides, front and back, across the street. We showed you pictures of what, if any, impact we were going to have on people's view sheds. I think you saw from my presentation, sure, the house directly across us is going to look over the breezeway, so I guess the railing for the roof deck might, interfere. But as far as the garage, yeah, maybe a little bit there, but not substantial at all. And we're at 21 feet, 22 feet. Your bylaw allows 35. I just don't think there has been a showing of substantial detriment. And that's really what we're asking this board to conclude. If you conclude we're not substantially detrimental and you grant us the permit, then it's our risk that when we go to do the building plans, the final details, oh boy, we have structural problems, the project's got to change. We got to come back, guys. We got to come back. So we're asking for a permit to do the project as proposed, nothing more, nothing less. We've gone to the Conservation Commission. We're going to get an order of conditions from them. We're just asking you to make a determination whether this small addition is in fact significantly detrimental for the neighborhood or not. And again, significantly more detrimental, I haven't heard anything to suggest that. Thank you.
I have a couple brief things. The reason I asked earlier about whether the covered breezeway would have a deck on it was because it seemed, I'm not an architect, unlike some of our members, but I have a construction background. It seemed pretty unlikely that a pre-1970s foundation and a covered breezeway would be adequate to support the load-bearing requirements for a passageway or a deck. So it was obvious to me that we would be looking at excavation, foundation work, additional costs, and additional conservation committee involvement. Secondly, one of the things that when I first became a member they always told us to look out for was people disguising bedrooms as studios or offices or something like that, which doesn't happen here, except that we do have in the existing house, which admittedly we're not touching, we do have two very unusually labeled rooms. Can't say I've ever seen a breezeway access room and a beach access room side by each in a drawing, but you can call your rooms what you like. Just making the bedroom point. But my last point, at the first meeting, there was some evidence and some testimony about the short-term rental sites, and it being advertised as a separate two-bedroom apartment attached to another house. And that evidence comes up again in this one. It looks like I could rent it right now if I had $1,400 for this week that we're currently in. I'm not saying this online printout is accurate, but it might be. So I guess it kind of undercuts your client's, at the very least it's disingenuous, if accurate, or certainly undercuts your client's argument that he never intended to use it as a separate apartment when it looks like it's currently being advertised as a separate apartment. Can you address that, Counsel?
I will, and in fact, we were only made aware of this, as I said, a couple of hours ago.
No, it came up last month, it's in the record, the specific ad.
There was a specific fact that the prior owner had in fact,
They said it was currently available, and it looks like it still is.
well, at the last meeting, what I said to you was that we were aware that the prior owner had rented this separate unit.
I think
and
the prior
told
owner
you-
doesn't really count, that was years ago, you know.
Right, and I told you that to the best of my understanding and in discussions with my client, he had never done so, okay? And now we see that information, okay? And I called my client immediately and said, well, do you have an ad running on this 411 site that you rent your apartment? He said no. I said, well, your name, your property, everything is here. And he said, well, I never placed that ad. And if you look at the ad, it was placed in 2006. Although I will agree, if you go online, you can find it. He indicated to me that
It
he
says
got
he's a member since 2006, and it also, but they specifically referenced VRBO, which is a company I've used, so it stuck in my mind at last month's meeting. I don't see the VRBO one here, and I also believe they've changed their name to Verbal.
Well, I'm not aware, and my client's here, he has told me that the property has been rented as a whole family, one family. I have no knowledge. Do you have a VRBO account that rents these as separate units, Al?
I do not.
And we can
So you're saying
verify
this
that.
is inaccurate and...
Well, that's not VRBO, that's this 411, right, that was established in 2006. I'll recall my client bought this home in 2011, okay? In fact, my client bought the home in 2011, it is true. We need to talk about this because, again, this
Yeah, this is the one from
my
last month.
client actually, and we brought copies of the emails. He was reached out to someone, he received an email from this 411 resort rental place saying that he had been given email requests to rent his property and he wasn't responding to them. Why not? And if you don't respond, we're gonna discontinue your ad, right? He had no knowledge of it. So he wrote back to the people and said, look, I don't rent my house on that thing, on that site. I do, however, rent my house as a whole structure, single-family home, on a different site. And he directed those people who reached out to him through this 411 thing and said, I don't rent my thing. And there's the emails. He had them from, I don't know, what's the date on them? 2010, 11. We tried unsuccessfully, only because of a lack of time. But we have tried to reach this 411 company to understand how it is that, a listing that was done by the prior owner is suddenly attached to my client's name. If you look on there, it says contact Al Ward. Doesn't provide his contact information, doesn't provide anything. If you see that, you got to go through the thing. We can get you a statement that my client has never rented that property through that thing.
Well,
And
we
have-
understand with the 411, I specifically said it, not sure if this is accurate.
Yeah, it's-
However, the VRBO ones, they submitted it last month, seems pretty accurate, and his letter here references the VRBO one. I'm just saying, perhaps you might want to at least get line everything up so that it's consistent.
Well, again,
So the
to
rental,
the point that it's inconsistent, okay? I'm still saying it's historical information. My clients have sit here and explained to the fact that in order to guarantee the board in the town and the neighbors and anyone else who has concern about it, that he will not, has not, and will not rent this as a single apartment or as 2 units. We're going to, remove the kitchenette, remove the door, put a condition in the permit that it can never happen, even though it's, as we know, it's already illegal. I just,
understood, but, okay, so the statement on renting, if it happened in the past and then it changes in the future, it can, something that can change, right?
He has the right to rent his property, absolutely, and we
Understood.
support that and encourage it.
And rent it in the right way. It doesn't paint a favorable picture as we're trying to assess what's going on here.
I don't disagree with that, but I
That's all
don't
we're
know what
saying.
more I can do
I'm just,
to guarantee to you that this isn't going, to happen.
Mind if I just say something? So I just want to say one thing, and take 2 minutes, please. I wanted the board to understand, there's been a lot back and forth going tonight. We have no problem, I think I can speak to the neighbors, Mr. Ward has a right to improve his home and do anything he wants. What we're saying is, what they're looking to improve, which we believe was put there illegal. There's no proof or building code or anything that separate bedroom, when he spoke about the assessor's office, it's not even in the assessor's card, that separate property. So we're looking to improve on something that wasn't legal in the first place, or is it part of the single-family house that exists there right now? The town doesn't assess that section. They don't assess it. So Mr. Ward can improve his house, add bedrooms, all he wants. We believe that section is illegal, and it's been used as a 2-family.
right, and if it has been used as a 2-family and there are means to correct it, and it's not used as a 2-family going forward, or is it proclaimed to be, then they have right to use it as a single family. I understand the concerns in past use, and, I don't know, whatever the stock market says, past use doesn't promote
Guaranteed.
guarantees, but it is, and we hear what you're saying, and I think, well, a couple things. So one is that there wasn't a door, there is now apparently a door, and physically we can go see the door and to the access to the breezeway. If there is a deck that is put on the breezeway, possibly there's a door added to the bedroom that's on the opposite side of the breezeway, so that there are 2 bedrooms that have access to the deck, which makes it more utilized as a single family, I would think. 2, is there any thought of reducing the paving in front of the house, having a 2-car garage and having 2 parking spaces in front of the garage, that pavement area? Usually we're making sure that people have enough parking. In this case, maybe they're the intended use. An allowance for parking out front could also be improved in terms of the intended use. So here's where I'm at. I think I still have some questions, and I have some questions that I'd like to ask town council on the stance of property. In the past, it's been it's always been the case that if there has been a structure on another property, that the first part of taking the step forward is that is rectified. And usually it's a tear down, or it's a move over, and it's a pretty, we haven't had, we did have one with, what's the Sunset Club on the corner there? Where they do have a small property in the back, but part of the condition and part of the approval was documenting on the plan that if anything was to happen to that, to improve or refurbish that unit, that it was then moved and made to a conforming structure on the site, and so there was a process for improving it. I think that's the only structure that has gone through the ZBA that was over the property line and was not rectified as part of the use, or part of the special permit that was granted for the use. So I have a question for town council on that stance and on that status. I would ask then, secondly, the building inspector in terms of the determination of how he goes about process and what he would enforce in terms of a determination that if the project did require substantially more work, what would that trigger? And that hasn't, it's been noted that there is a trigger, but exactly what the ramifications of that triggering are, because we would not, you know, we make motions and we make decisions, and at the same time we say that, you know, if you misrepresented or you misbilled, that you can't come back to us and say that we approved it. You're liable.
Sure.
You have to follow all the building codes and regulations. And so if something is built wrong, we didn't approve it, even if it was somehow misrepresented on the plans. We're not going to take that stance and give you any kind of favor at the point of accepting something that is incorrect or not done correctly, especially with like building height and stuff like that.
Mr. Chairman, I would certainly respectful of the fact that the board wants to find out about this encroachment. And certainly my client is going to grant you the continuance or whatever you need to get to the bottom of that, because I think it's a legitimate question and concern. We hope our understanding of it is correct, but if it turns out we're wrong, then obviously that's going to be a big issue for us. But I do take exception to two things that were just stated, and that is, one, that the assessor's office doesn't even assess the garage in that structure. I got the assessor's card right here. They certainly do. And they assess it as a single-family home with all of those structures. And secondly, this continued claim that that was built illegally and therefore you cannot, do anything with it. We all know it's Mass General laws that provides the answer to that. If it was over 10 years without a building permit, it's deemed legal for zoning purposes. So I think we could put that one to bed. And Mr. Chairman, if you would like me to ask for or grant you a continuance, and if you need an extension on your time to act, I'm happy to provide that right now.
Do you have any?
I have a question.
Oh,
Just a quick question.
yep, you state your name.
A couple things on the, my name is Susan Grillo. I'm also in a butter diagonally to the property,
What's the address?
424th Street.
Thank you.
On the field card, it indicates I thought it indicated the number of garages was 0, but I could be reading it incorrectly. The other thing on the field card is that, the assessor's card, is that the property has 1.5 bathrooms. I thought that when the PIOD went in, I lived in my home for over 30 years, so experienced the whole installation of the PIOD, that there was a limitation on the number of bathrooms that could be added so that the property did not become more detrimental to the water and sewer system. So this property has 1.5 bathrooms, if that is correct, and I think there's a lot of mistakes that.
So I think you can have, I think the limit is on bedrooms, because the number of bedrooms determines the number of people. You can have 20 bathrooms and still only 3 bedrooms, and so the use of the 20 bathrooms would be by the 3 people. Is kind of how it's seen. I don't recall, but we'll certainly check on that. That has not been something that has come up in the past in terms of assessment of the PIOD.
Okay.
It's been the number of bedrooms, and the number of bedrooms limits the people, and the people using how many bathrooms there are.
Okay, I'm mistaken it, thank you. The garage is included on the record card, I've got it right here. It's
Okay,
600
so
675 square
I'm going to ask for a motion, but I have a few questions that I would like to, before we get to a motion.
Okay.
I think asking the building inspector about the condition of determination of the process of what what triggers the 50%, or what triggers additional work, or what that work might be, and if that, if there is so close and there is concern about going over that, and if going over that would require raising on piles, then there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done, and additional changes in terms of encroachment would need to be made and be resolved. So I'd like to understand that from the building inspector. I'd like to understand from town council what encroachment the town's stance and the town's legal ability or the town's rights to say something, and it may come to naught, and it may be just as what was stated is, you know, we've got access, people use it, and we don't have issues. I don't know, but I'm gonna try to run that to ground. And 3, we will either talk to the assessors or double check the assessor's card. We typically have said sometimes that the assessor's card has not been up to date, and have noted that, but then have not, or have asked for additional documentation in terms of current plans to set the record straight. If the assessor's card says 1 3/4 bathrooms and someone says, no, there's 2, we say, okay, look, draw it in the plans and we're gonna prove it out in the plans against the assessor's card. But we will look at that and make sure that what it is assessed and what it is recognized by the town and what the town has been basically taxing or allowing is on the card and for the use. That said, with the kitchenette taken out, with the covered breezeway having a deck, normally we don't like decks, but there's not much additional height, but adding a door to the 2nd floor so that someone from 2 different bedrooms could use the covered, or could use the deck over the covered breezeway, in keeping with one family use, would seem to be, and then taking out the kitchenette, taking out the utilities that serve the kitchenette, would seem to be going a long way to removing the ability to have a separate unit. And we have had, and been advised by town council, where we've had people that have had bedrooms over garages with stairs that are accessible from the outside with a wet bar. And our argument is all you need to do is add a hot plate and you can have a separate unit, but town council has advised that if it's not there and physically laid out, we cannot make those assumptions. So there's quite a bit of leeway there. And then the final argument on both sides is that it is in keeping with the neighborhood. And the neighborhood could be just the 2 adjacent houses and across the street, or it could be greater Plum Island as it's seen in terms of what's being proposed. And so there is broad discretion there, and that argument is to be made by either side for our determination. It's not for us to make the diagrams unless we react to something that is presented to us, but it's not our argument to make. Is that understood on both sides? So with that, either would ask for a motion for a continuance to check out these, and if there's anything else you'd like to add to the list, please do so.
I'd like to make a motion then to continue the discussion with the building inspector and town council regarding the issues that Eric just presented.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion on that or any addition to that? All right. Understand that the applicant's in favor of that, so.
Need to continue to a time and date.
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Your single
Continue
time.
to
December 15th,
December 15th.
yes,
That's
sir.
the third, that's the third Thursday?
Yes, it is.
Because the first
Third
Thursday's on the
Thursday.
1st, yeah. Is, would say in this case, are both sides available on 12/15?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
That works.
And I would add a condition, if there's any additional information from either side, that we say that you're gonna get it in by 12/8, which is the Thursday, or the 9th, or we're closed on Friday. So you have to get it in on, thank you, 12/8, so that we have time to read it and understand it, and it's fair for everyone, both sides can get copies, and we all can look at the same thing, and have some time to digest it. So, continue it to time and date of...
December 15th at 7:30.
Yes. Okay. Second that, again?
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we have a continuance.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Everybody. One more. Chrissy, did you get a copy of this that was
Yes.
handed to us? Counselor? This was handed to us on...
Oh, she gave me a copy.
You guys have to sign the decision.
Thank you.
There's not anything else.
Oh, there's not?
If you agree to sign the decision tonight, I can incorporate those changes in a week from Monday and get all the mailings out, stamp it in with the town clerk, and then we're good to go. They were minor.
They were minor. I would be in agreement to sign it, but I'd like to receive a digital copy
Confer with
first.
council.
No.
So we could sign the last page, leave it with you. We sign down a digital copy and get a chance just to read it once in a while last time, and then we can say go.
Yep.
Say what goes with it. I think that's fine for the minor edits.
But I wasn't sure I understood, because I potentially avoiding it, or I misunderstood. You spoke with the building inspector, was it
He went out and took a look at it, and he said, I said, well, what about the door to the breezeway? There's no door. These aren't even. He said, I didn't look for that. I wasn't there to observe that. I didn't see that. I was just looking at the garage and the kitchenette and the fact that they were gonna go up, and understood what was happening right there and on that part of the project. And I should have put that into the record, but he said, I look for the obvious. It's got a single mailing address, and if the advance card is there. And there's no objectionable notice that there's 500
Can we sign this now?
yard. And if it passes the obvious, then I have the sense of the use.
So we're going by that, you know, I know we don't like the cube, but we're going by that's his interpretation for right now.
Well, I think that's part of asking him again, just to
Okay.
make his statement of inspection.
Can I use your pen? Oh, no,
Sure.
I think I do have it.
And I would assume that someone might file